SC Media and our sponsor, Sempris, are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. This is the show where CISOs share tales from the trenches and unpack leadership lessons learned along the way. Find this month's CISO Stories content at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, please visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CRC. Welcome back for another episode of CISO Stories Podcast. I got my buddy Mike Miller with me. We're going to talk about incident response and how that's integrated into the managerial, technical, and physical controls that we all love so much. What's up, Mike? How you doing today?
Fantastic, Jessica. How are you?
Amazing, amazing. The weather is just so perfect today. I'm about to play hooky. Like after this is over, I'm outie. So let's
It's
go.
Friday. It's Friday. We made it.
We made it.
We just got to get through this. So.
Oh, well, it'll be fun. So, welcome to the show. I know you're a busy guy, man. Thanks for taking time with us. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Mike Miller. I've been in IT/cybersecurity for about 25 plus years. I say 25 plus, so I just kind of stopped showing my age because it just keeps going up. And I started in desktop support, worked from there to, that was a long time ago, back in the dial-up internet days, and worked from there to sysadmin, network admin, consultant, got into GRC, pen testing, founded a firm, sold it about 3 years ago. And so I'm the person that I always say I'm an expert of nothing, but I know a little bit about a lot of things, right? And that's been my journey. So that's me.
Excellent. If y'all don't know, Mike is famous dude. Okay, we're really lucky to have you on the show with us today.
Absolutely not. Thank you.
So you mentioned GRC. I know you post a lot about that. You're into that. I mean, that is pretty much the cornerstone of cyber at the end of it all. Yeah. Again, we'll talk about today about incident response and not just how you report on it from a GRC perspective, but how we're actually implementing those technical or logical controls, managerial or operational controls or physical controls. I know everybody kind of uses different terms sometimes for that. But let's talk about physical controls when it comes to incident response. I know you have a cool story you want to share with us.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that seems to be overlooked so much, is the physical aspect of incident response. We think that, if you look at breaches, 80% of breaches happen because of the human element, right? We think that there's going to be a sophisticated, well thought out attack when really it's something simple. And yeah, an example that I love to talk about is I was hired by a client contract in Pennsylvania a long time ago with a large retailer, and to see what I could do physically. And I sat outside with a box of donuts. I tailgated my way in. I waited for the late stragglers, about, people who arrive at, 10 after 8, quarter after 8, and they're rushing in the door. And so I go to my back seat and I got this big stack of Krispy Kreme donuts. And I walk to the door and they can't see if I have a badge or not, 'cause it's badge access. But who isn't going to hold the door open for a guy who has 5 dozen donuts?
Krispy Kreme at that.
Yeah. Krispy Kreme. Yeah. They don't know what's under the lid, right? They don't know what kind it is or anything. So anyhow, I I get in the door and I asked the lady, I said, do you mind walking me to the break room so I can put these donuts down? And she goes, oh, you know what? No, I don't need to walk you there. It's straight down the hall and make a left. So I'm inside the building and she walks off and there I am. I'm inside the building with my 5 dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. And I walk down the hall, go into the break room, set the donuts down. And as I was doing that, as I was walking there, I was doing some recon. And I noticed a bunch of cubicles on the right side that were empty, kind of like temporary cube spaces for contractors. So after I dropped the donuts off, and this was part of the engagement I was hired for, I took my backpack with my laptop and I sat down inside one of these cubes. Being a 5'4" person, I can hide in a cube really easy, right? So I sat down in the cube and I pulled my laptop out. Obviously, I can't connect to the lockdown Wi-Fi, but the desk had an RJ45 jack. And so I took my cable, plugged it in, grabbed the DHCP address, was on the network. I was able to run my tools, Nmap, Nessus, what have you. And I sat there for almost 3 hours, unnoticed. Wow. No IDS tripped, nothing, nobody, right? So you would think that an IDS would trip or something, and they would track it down to what port that's coming from, which is cube 9 or whatever, and they didn't. So in a 2 to 3 hour period, I was able to sit down, do a total recon of their network, scan it for vulnerabilities, put my laptop back in my backpack. I walked right back to the break room. I stood there. I ate another donut. So I bought these things. And then I walked out the door. Right. And so many people, so many organizations feel like, well, that can't happen to us, right? We'll notice it. But you just never know. It's the person carrying a ladder. It's the person carrying donuts. It's the person that's working on the HVAC system. So it's important, on the physical side to have controls in place to be able to detect that stuff. Anomalies, cameras, badge access, awareness. I mean, the main thing there was just the awareness, right? The person who held the door for me and then said, "Oh, you can just go straight down the hall." So that was just a major. That was probably one of my funnest contracts that I worked, but it just shows you how vulnerable companies can be on the physical side.
Active Directory is the #1 target for cybersecurity threats. It's a threat that's harder to detect and prevent than ever. Because in the process of adopting, managing, and securing each unique AD environment, organizations develop separate teams using separate tools in separate silos, which means neither team can detect the threat across silos until it's too late. To combat today's cyber attacks, enterprises like yours need a way to see the whole picture beyond silos and secure their entire hybrid AD environment. Now you can with Sempris. Visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/Sempris. Yeah, I have used that donut trick myself. And although I'm not 5'6", I wasn't gonna say nothing, but I'm pretty noticeable when I walk in
Yes.
a place. But yeah, the donuts always do the trick. They're like, "Oh wow, a lady with donuts is so amazing. Thank you so much." So yeah, I think that's one of the favorites. I actually did a pen test with a gentleman, such as yourself, tasked to do that. And he got in and went to a whiteboard in a meeting room and wrote, "So and so was here." Got in a lot of trouble for
Really?
that.
Yeah.
So probably don't want to do that. But
Probably
this
not a good move.
probably not a good move. But this client that, this pretty significant issue. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
pretty significant risk right there. Without like giving any, specific client details, like how did you risk that? What kind of remediation did you propose to them?
So, I mean, basically, the first thing was training. Just, here's the thing, right? With compliance, whether it's SOC 2, PCI, NIST, whatever it is, companies are kind of required to do the security training once a year. But let's think about that, right? We have, on the logical side, we have these systems monitoring and detecting all day long, 24/7. But 80% of breaches happen because of the human element. So why is it that we only have to be required to do that training once a year? Like it seems silly, right? So obviously companies want to meet their compliance, but go a little above and beyond. Have a weekly tips newsletter that goes out from your security team, whatever it is. So that was my main thing. Second, it was obviously cameras. There were no cameras in place at all. Um, the third was when I plugged my laptop into that port, I shouldn't have been able to do anything. It should have been disabled, right? So obviously there were a bunch of other things, but they were that was really the main three. And then the fourth was, I mean, I just did a full on, very aggressive scan across the entire network. Why was that not detected? Why did someone not come to my desk and remove me? you know?
I'm sure it was a noisy scan too, right?
Yeah, and the other
Yeah.
thing was I didn't. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything. And the other thing was I didn't have a badge. And when I was in a break room, like I was talking to people, but no one verified. Again, just because I'm the friendly guy with donuts. So, and for the win, it's always a chocolate covered donuts for the win. So, yeah,
I on that note too, like I feel like you said, a lot of times physical security when it comes to
yeah,
the part it plays in incident response or just any kind of incident is somewhat sometimes downplayed because everything's in the cloud, right? We don't
yes,
necessarily have on-prem data centers or data closets or whatever these days. Maybe you have your firewall and your VoIP and things like that,
yep,
but not necessarily like all the significant infrastructure that is running your business.
Absolutely.
So I think your
Yeah.
example right there was like really valuable as far as it wasn't just that they got on prem and you got inside and you could look around and do recon and see who works there and what they're working on, maybe look at some paper, physical stuff,
Yeah.
but you were actually able to plug in and run scans and get
I know.
data.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And most people think that, like, the public is, I've told this story. I told this story on on a Malwarebytes podcast. And I had so many people say, that can't be true. But, you'll be surprised at the organizations, small to mid level, that don't have that type of access control in place. People just assume it is, but it's not.
So let's pivot now to the technical control aspect. So you
Logical.
did
Yeah,
you did talk
absolutely.
about that, right? You got physical access, and then you were able to get logical access and do your thing.
Yep.
Um, you know, we all know how incident response usually it's well not always or usually
Yeah.
somebody coming in from the outside, but insider threat is also a big deal too. So
Yeah.
what are some experiences that you might have had as far as incident response specifically to logical controls, maybe a different example that you were able to leverage your expertise to find some vulnerabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked in organizations that had no monitoring set up at all, right? So it allows you to pivot and really do anything you want to do undetected. Um, the other thing too is that you have networks that are, I've walked into organizations back when I was PCI QSA, and they're checking a box for compliance. And I walked into one particular organization and asked if I could see their IDS system, and they were checking compliance, but it was still literally was still in the box that it was shipped in, but it was in a closet. But they have an IDS system, right? So it's not only having the infrastructure, it's being able to have the bodies then to monitor that stuff as well. There's always so much noise, right? So if you look at the Target breach that happened way back, right? There was so much noise being triggered from their IDS for like half a year, but no one noticed. So it's having those bodies in place too, having them trained so that they can see those anomalies and then report on them. Because otherwise, if not, just like when I was in that organization, you could really do anything you want to do.
So that's a good point. I mean, there's obviously large businesses, small business, and medium-sized businesses that maybe have one person doing all IT, maybe outsource, or just, kind of say, oh, well, we have a cloud, that's part of our subscription or whatever. You just mentioned about the importance of monitoring. I think we can say that all day long. Everybody knows that, but the
Yeah.
actual implementation of it
Yeah.
is where organizations struggle with. Are
Yes.
there some low hanging fruit that you would suggest that could be turned on or monitored or automated or using AI based tech that would really help, especially those small and medium sized businesses
Yeah.
that might not have that expertise?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is you cannot protect what you don't know you have. Most organizations, when I go in as a vCISO, um, they don't have an asset list, right? They don't have any type of tracking on what they have. And I'm telling you, this is 85% of the organizations that I go into now. They might have an asset, an asset tracking, but it's 5 years out of date, right? Last it was updated was, maybe 2017 or 2019. So what I would say, the first thing you have to do is you have to really clearly understand what you have, right, on your network or that's tied to your network. And then, you have to make sure, in my opinion, every system is equal because, many companies, well, we'll put endpoint management on the servers, on the critical servers. Well, I've been in organizations where I found an old server sitting in a wooden cabinet that they didn't even know was sitting there. There was no type of monitoring on it at all. It wasn't on the asset list, so you could sit in there potentially for 2 years if you wanted to and monitor. So what I would say to any organization is the most important thing you can do is track your assets. You have to know what your assets are. And then obviously if it comes down to budget, which 90% of the time it does, and you can only afford to cover certain things, cover the critical systems, right? But you also can't forget about those systems that aren't critical that could also be used as a pivot point.
So you would say, as far as organizations balancing automation and human intervention, like focus on critical assets more so.
Yeah, focus on critical assets. I would highly recommend that. Obviously, if you can use if you have the budget for, Sentinel-1, CrowdStrike, those types of services where you have AI, you have all the automation, and you can disperse that to your entire network, absolutely do that. And that is where you have to kind of step back and take a 30,000-foot view of your organization's budget and assets, and maybe there's somewhere else that we can cut back on our budget so that we can get all of our endpoints protected. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of having everything protected, but just you got to do at least something's better than nothing, right?
Are there any other technical controls specifically that you think are mostly overlooked within organizations besides
Yeah,
the monitoring piece?
MFA not being there, segmentation,
What's
right?
MFA? Yes.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, MFA not being there, segmentation. You know, I'm still shocked at how many flat networks there are at organizations when I go out there, and even especially in the SMB market. So having systems segmented, um, third, even so. I talk a lot about third party risk as well, right? If you have a third party that has access to your HVAC system, refrigerators, or what have you, have their credentials turn on at a certain time in the morning and then turn off at 5 o'clock, right? Do they need to be turned on all night? Absolutely not. Make sure that those credentials, if I have ABC HVAC company that's in my system, do they have just one login for all of their employees, or do all of their employees also have unique logins as well? So it's tracking stuff like that too. Those are the things that I see are just overlooked, because there has to be accountability.
How about zero trust architecture?
Yeah, I mean, people shouldn't have access to stuff that they shouldn't have access to. It should be least privilege, or only have access to stuff if they need it. Yeah, it definitely shouldn't be the Wild West and wide open for sure.
We're in 2025, people.
And it's still the Wild West.
It-
And it's still wide open.
yeah, network segmentation, I think is, as an auditor, that's my jam,
Yes.
a lot of these things are like, oh, I can't believe you don't have that. But then it's like,
Yeah.
especially the organizations that have a lot of legacy,
Yeah. Oh,
just
yeah.
inherently because they've been around for a long time, especially like critical infrastructure. We
Yeah.
all know IT, certainly a lot of legacy there, and the
Yeah.
need for network segmentation.
Yeah.
Again, like a no brainer, OT shouldn't be talking, or I'm sorry, IT shouldn't be talking to OT, right? But,
Yep.
well,
I
and like
know.
you said, the
Yeah.
third parties, I shouldn't be able to, third party XYZ
Yeah.
shouldn't be, connecting to our engines, whatever they want to, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And you mentioned OT, right? OT tends to get away, like those systems tend to get away with murder, right? The system that opens the gate, closes the gate, or what have you. Those are the systems that are typically left with default usernames and passwords, and you can get, firmware is not updated. You can get in there and just sit there for a year if you wanted to. So yes, it's everything. Everything's an equal, right?
Where do you think social engineering would fall into all of these technical, managerial, and
Yeah,
physical?
I think it falls into every category. I really do. Again, I'll go back to 80% of the breaches, according to the Verizon breach report, which I read every year, and some others, it's like it was 82, 83% of breaches happen because of the human element. So social engineering, absolutely. Phishing, right? I mean, I think we all get fished just about every day. So that goes back to the user awareness training. Once a year is not enough. There has to be more. There has to be a culture of security so that when someone clicks a link that they think they shouldn't have clicked, they don't just hide under the desk and don't tell anybody about it, right? There has to be a culture where we can talk openly about mistakes that we make. How can we learn from that? Things to watch out for. And that's what I find is that most organizations don't have that open culture that they can, because their hands are kind of slapped, if they do something wrong, which then next time they're not going to talk about it. So social engineering, vishing, right? We just did a vishing engagement not too long ago, and it's amazing some of the organizations that people will answer the phone and tell you everything you need to know about their computer, tell you about their environment they're working in, and give you all kinds of information. again, everything goes back to that user awareness training. That once a year know before training, that's not going to do for you.
Yeah, I agree. Changing the culture is huge. That's one of my favorite things to do. Like I was walking past, I was out, walking outside near the job, and somebody's like, security lady, I have a question. And that's because they know me. I go out in the streets and I'm like,
Yeah.
are you scared yet? Are you scared? Not scared to where you don't want to report, but scared to where you're thinking twice, like, should I do it?
Yeah.
Should I do it? Is this
I
person, have
know.
I seen this person before? Should I click on this link? Should I give out this information? So scared enough to second guess, there may be
Yes.
their initial response of giving it up. But I think we can't ever talk enough about the human factor, changing the culture, awareness and training. Once a year, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, so much changes every year, except for multi-factor. Gosh, I'm like,
I know.
it's like, how are we still talking about this stuff? But oldie but
Yeah.
goodie.
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Absolutely.
well, how
Absolutely.
about the managerial processes or controls or operational, however
Yeah.
they
So
go
it's
intertwine?
it's having those policies and procedures in place, right? We can't wait until after an incident happens to develop a playbook, to develop policies, to develop procedures. Those are things that we should be working on all of the time, right? And we have to make sure that it's not just the technical people, right? But it's the managerial, it's the stakeholders, that are also involved in that too. The communication, when do we communicate to legal? When do we communicate to the lawyers? When do we communicate to the media, right? We have to have a plan for that. And typically, if you have a solid plan, the meme out there where everything is on fire, but the guy's just sitting there, right? And I think of that often, right? It's you want your team in a place where when something happens, you just want to be kind of flatline. You know what? We've been through this, we've practiced this, and without even thinking, the procedures that you have to walk through, the phone calls you have to make because it's been planned for, right? If we don't have those in place, then when an incident happens, everybody panics, right? And then bad thing. It only makes the problem worse. So it's having all of the right people, the right plan, and the right expectations, in place.
So everybody, well, they should know about instant response plans, playbooks, the comms, like you just mentioned. But what are some of the other common mistakes you think organizers, or you can, ugh, my goodness, you got me so excited, Mike. I was just like, it might be the weather. I don't know if it's you. I can't give
Who
you all the
knows?
credit.
Who
Um,
knows?
what are some other common mistakes that you've seen or you believe organizations make when it comes to implementing IR related policies and procedures?
Assuming, right? No accountability, just assuming that the IT team has this, the security team has this, our team is ready, right? There's so many assumptions in this field, but then when something does happen, then we find out we actually weren't ready, right? So proper documentation, having an audit. This is one of the best things that you can have because it's going to tear you apart and it's going to find your gaps and tell you where your weaknesses are. So it's having those types of things done. And yeah, for me, the biggest weakness is just assumptions, right? You know what happens when you assume things, and it happens too much in this industry. It just gets us in trouble.
I like that. That should be a shirt. No
Yeah,
assumptions.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No assumptions. Let me see the evidence, right? So when I'm doing an audit and they tell me, yep, we have, these systems are being scanned every night, I'm like, great, let me see the evidence. Show me the screenshots, right? And that doesn't happen often enough. You need a third party. You can't just rely on your own security team and your own IT team and assume that those things are happening. You have to have a third party audit, a non-biased party that can actually give you some real data.
So on that note too, do you think having strong policies, procedures, and tabletop exercises, and communications plan, and everybody when things happen, there's gonna be some dysfunction.
Yeah.
There just is, right?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
if you have practiced, you have the procedures in place, everybody who needs to be involved. Um, how can we use that to get buy-in from leadership?
Open communication, right? There has to be, I always go back to relationships, and I post about this all the time. Relationships are your key to success in anything that you are doing, right? So we don't want to wait until there's an incident to try to form a relationship with the stakeholder and show them all the bad stuff that's happened, right? Those relationships are so very important, right? So there needs to be from your security team, there needs to be a voice that sits at the table with those stakeholders on, whether it's a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly meeting, so that there's always a bridge between the two, right? Cybersecurity is a business function, right? It's a business risk. It's not an IT problem, right? It's part of the business. So there should always be someone at the table with those stakeholders when we're having those discussions.
For sure. Well, let's wrap all that up in a nice little packaged bow. Let's use your donut. What do you call it? Donut hole story?
My donut breach story.
Donut
Yeah,
breach story. All right. So you gave us the foundation. You were able to walk right in with your tasty Krispy Kreme donuts that everybody loves, probably piping hot. You know what I mean? That's at least
absolutely.
what people had in their brains, that they were coming off the conveyor belt. They let you in. That's the physical breach. You're able to plug up within the cube and do your thing for a couple hours.
2 to 3.
Go
Yeah.
back and have a donut in the break room. Maybe met some friends. I don't know. So so let's wrap that all up. So using that scenario, give us like a rundown of maybe 2 to 3 things for each of those, that for the physical controls that we can have in place, operational or managerial, and the technical or logical controls. Give us like 2 to 3 things for each of those types of controls that your client or just anybody listening should learn from that story.
Absolutely. So first one, physical, and I'm going to say this one on every one of them: training, security awareness training, a good culture, cameras in place, badge access, right? Access on the RJ45 ports so that someone can't plug in, right? On the logical side, it's using SIM, EDR, MDR, XDR, whatever it is, SOAR, whatever it is, to watch for anomalies and pick up on these, these things, these possible intrusions that are happening on these full scans, right? Like that I was sitting at that desk doing. You also have to have a team that's watching those. Maybe it's a third party, maybe it's in house, but those teams need to be trained as well. On the last part, it would be, again, security awareness training all the time, having policies and procedures that match your organization. It's easy to we can all go to ChatGPT and we can make policies and procedures. I've seen people do it, but I'm telling you, it's not going to match your organization. So you need to work with key players, right, in your company to make sure that those policies and procedures match your organization. Tabletop exercises, often playbooks, an open culture, and just being able to take all of those 3 things and be able to have open communication about them. And the last thing, like I said, is having a seat at the table, with the stakeholders.
What's your favorite playbooks? Like a top 3 to 5 playbooks you would say every organization, generally speaking. I know everybody's different, but what would you say are the top 3 to 5 playbooks that folks should have?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a firm fan of the 861. So, having a look at that, walking down through that, looking at the controls, being able to prep, right? Being able to detect, being able to then eradicate, isolate, segment, and then being able to do the post activities of what type of lessons did we learn. And I can't really say I'm in favor of one particular playbook, but they should all have those 4 parts in it, right? Being able to prepare, detect, eradicate, contain, and then the post activities after the lessons learned.
All right, that's fair. I love it. So tell everybody how they can find you, Mike Miller.
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on there. Just hit up Mike Miller, and I think I have a blue sports coat on. That's probably the best place to reach me. I also work at Appalachian Technologies, so you can hit up the website there and reach out to me there as well.
So you normally have a blue blazer on. Is that what you said? Not a
Well, my
Band City?
profile picture is a blue blazer. Yeah, yeah. Which I don't know if it fits me anymore, but it did. It did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
first time I saw Mike in person, it was after a road trip, and I was going to the bar, and he was sitting in my seat, and I was like, "Who is this
yeah,
person in my
yeah.
seat?" And he turned around, I was like, Oh, I know you. And I was about to go off, but it
And,
was
it,
okay. We
and
worked
I
it out.
remember because it was like almost midnight, and I walked in with my sweatpants on, and you go, "You look rough." I'll never forget that.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Good first meeting in person, but we've been talking for a few years, so I always
Absolutely.
appreciate your time. One last question I like to ask all my viewers. Hopefully you didn't prep for this, but Mike Miller, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? What advice would you give him?
Oh man, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you that you can learn from. And I'm a huge believer of your network is your net worth. And I'm not talking about the TCP/IP kind. I'm talking about the handshaking kind. Again, success in this industry, which I said right in the beginning, comes down to relationships and bonds. Start building those. So when I was 18, I wasn't thinking about that, you know. So that's what I would tell my younger self.
Solid advice. And Mike, I know you do a lot in the community. You're a big voice on LinkedIn, helping folks break into cyber. You have a book about it too. So if you're interested in that or know somebody who wants to break in, make sure you hit up Mike. He's a wealth of information and really
Thank you.
appreciate you, dude, all the things that you're doing for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Keep up the good work. You got an awesome podcast, and you're a fantastic human being. So don't change.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll pay you later for that one. I
I already
appreciate you,
Venmoed you.
Mike.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Mike. You've been an awesome guest on this month's podcast on incident response. Hope you got some tidbits. We will check you guys out next month, and be well, and everybody be safe. Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of CISO Stories Podcast. We want to say a special thank you to this month's sponsor, Sempris. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories Podcast and you will receive a new episode on the second Monday of each month.